So how did Contrapoints go from one of the OG BreadTube creators to the subreddit discussing if they should completely ban her content from being posted there? That is something I want to talk about today, and this video has actually been in my head for the longest time, but I made a decision a couple weeks ago not to make it, and I just thought it wouldn't be helpful. And sometimes you just, have other things in your mind you want to talk about, and other things were in my head, like how the UK is going full fascist because of its war on free speech to protect Israel, things like that. But I've come back to it because I saw that Contrapoints was beefing with Taylor Lorenz on Twitter, and it was about left-wing anti-Semitism. And this is something that seems to be only discussed right now by people who don't really talk much about Gaza and also exist in leftist video essay circles. Now, I've actually called out people before, not by name, but there seems to be some sort of correlation between leftists who are on Nebula and leftists who have chosen to talk about leftist anti-Semitism while Israel are doing the worst crime against humanity of this century and one of the worst crimes in the post-war era. I just find it really interesting that that is the case. But this video isn't me trying to pressure anyone to talk about Gaza, because to me right now, if you haven't spoke about it, I don't give a shit if you speak about it. You've clearly made a choice not to talk about it. So I'm not pressuring anyone. I don't want anyone to go to other creators' comment section and say, why haven't you spoken about Gaza? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? It doesn't matter. By October, it would have been 2 years, and they've had absolutely loads of time to do it. This video isn't some sort of pressure campaign against very prominent creators to do a fundraiser for Gaza or something like that. It's more about growing out of certain content niches, the failures of BreadTube, how something that seemed quite radical, I guess, in its own way back in 2018, 2019, how it really has just served its purpose and has, in my opinion, become pretty irrelevant to online politics. Sure, they release videos that get a lot of views. They've also had very mainstream success, and they're pretty irrelevant to the moment in time we find ourselves in with politics in the UK and the US, where these creators are primarily from. And I always think about this. If you told a lot of them what 2023, 4 and 5 would look like in terms of this terrible crime being done in Gaza, but also Western governments using that to whip up Islamophobia, to actually enact fascist policies, they'd probably say they'd make videos calling it out and stuff. But it so happens that a lot of them don't do this. And I've actually asked on Instagram for a lot of people who are fans of these creators or are fans of these creators, what do they think about all of this? So we're going to read that for you at the end. But this isn't a very structured essay. It's just me venting my own thoughts about all of this stuff today, and just about how sometimes political movements, online political movements, they can serve their purpose, and then you can realize their value has kind of gone. And I think that is the case with BreadTube video essayists, and I would also say left-wing video essayists. There are still a lot that I like. There are still a lot who I agree with their politics. I really respect the content they've made. Best example of this is Noah Sampson literally changing his entire channel right now to something that nearly exclusively talks about Palestine, which is really commendable. I haven't seen anyone else do that. And he had a very successful channel based on not talking about stuff that really had anything to do with that. So that is the best example I've seen. And he did that massive fundraiser. I was happy to go on, and he raised loads of money, did something very tangible. And I also think it's interesting, the people who didn't go on that, and you're asking yourselves, why wouldn't they go on that? And then you ask yourselves, why haven't they really spoke about any of this stuff? And that's what I really want to get into today. Talk about, the BreadTube phenomenon and just why they kind of don't really matter anymore to actual politics, where they actually did have some sort of political influence back in the day. But before we go any further, if you like my content after you watch the video, please leave a like, maybe subscribe to my channel. If you want to support my work, check out my Patreon and check out my YouTube memberships. And if you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Blue Sky and also on Instagram. One small thing I want to start with, because when you make videos about people, or make videos about maybe people who others are friends with or know, they think you might be calling them out. All I will say is, if you don't feel called out by anything I'm saying, this video isn't about you. So I do have people in my head that I'm also talking about that I'm not going to mention by name, because they're smaller creators and I don't want to start some massive drama with other small creators. But there's pretty much the 3 creators I'm going to talk about today, and maybe 4 or 5 more that I'm also thinking of. But let's just set the scene for why these people are even relevant. So because a lot of you would be younger now, especially people who maybe watch my content. You might not remember the YouTube days of the internet, maybe 10 years ago plus, but you think it's bad now with how much conservatives dominate like all elements of YouTube. It was actually worse 10 years ago because there was no real left-wing alternative to a lot of the content we were seeing. And again, with like nerd media was dominated by right-wingers then as it is now, but there was no massive alternative. And you had things like Gamergate, this massive anti-SJW movement, and BreadTube isn't any like formal movement, and you could link some of it to like the new atheist YouTube content and the split within that community where one went full right wing and others tried to stay more like liberal and principled. There's a lot of stuff going on, and so much of it is relevant to what creator you're talking about. But if we're talking about these broad strokes, but like 2017 to maybe 2020, we have like a new group of rising creators and it gets called BreadTube, and prominent people get lumped into this. Obviously, the people we're talking about today: Contrapoints, Hbomberguy, Abigail Thorne, also Sean, Cat Black, Anita Sarkeesian, Ian Danskin. I've seen some people throw like Hassan and like Vosh and Destiny into this. While back in the day, Destiny was seen as like a more left-wing voice, I wouldn't class these people as necessarily anything to do with BreadTube. There are some like interactions and overlap, but I would say there's like two kinds of things going on here. There's like left-wing news and politics, and there's BreadTube. And although you could maybe, if you want to just put a broad generalization and say they're all like left-wing YouTube, that's fine. But at the same time, I would say they're two separate things. One is like video essays about often academic topics where the creator will release like not many videos in the year, and their channels will rely on the business model of maybe the odd sponsorship, but mainly a Patreon backing. It's very much like a community thing, where the politics stuff seems to be more based on the Young Turks model. And that's actually an interesting parallel I might draw right now, actually, is I think these are two different kind of influential groups that have run their course, and have run their course on their positive influence on politics generally. But these content creators became like really, really popular. For me personally, I wasn't actually that influenced by any of these people, and I'm pretty sure I'd never actually watch any of their videos until I was a YouTuber myself. But I will say, I have heard so many content creators on the left, whether that be actual video essayists in a similar style or just people who cover politics, who have said that they were brought to the left by these people, they were completely influenced by these people, they loved their content, they wanted to be YouTubers themselves because of these people. And I've seen so much sentiment online that these people were a very, very positive force in shifting either their views leftward or creating these left-wing communities online. And I would say all of these people have contributed to something good because they were part of something that has had a very positive influence on the online space, and that is creating this alternative to right-wing social media that simply really didn't exist anymore. And I feel like without BreadTube, we don't have as much success with people who are like outwardly socialist, Marxist and stuff like that, despite the fact that a lot of these creators might be more like Soc Dem or left liberals and stuff. I think they have had a really good influence. And I would say that in parallel with the Young Turks as well, because the Young Turks, in my opinion, has run its course for similar reasons, but for completely different reasons. I would say with BreadTube, it's about their reluctance to talk about stuff like Gaza and Palestine, and also like domestic fascism rising because of this issue specifically, whereas the Young Turks are actually pretty good on that specific issue. It's just everything else they're terrible on, and they've seemed to have just lost their minds and gone to war with the left. And I bring up the Young Turks as a parallel to BreadTube because you see now there are so many news channels. So you had the Young Turks and Secular Talk, then obviously you have like now Humanist Report, Rational National, a whole host of others that are like a very similar style to TYT, collaborated with TYT back in the day, and it feels like TYT laid the groundwork for a lot of these channels and actually created this space for a lot of these channels to exist in. And although I wasn't influenced by BreadTube to start my own YouTube channel, I was influenced by the Young Turks and these other channels, which already existed when I started my channel, to make my own YouTube videos. And although I'm far more left-wing than the Young Turks, and I have been for a long time, even when I still liked them, they did serve that purpose. And if they didn't exist, then my channel wouldn't exist. I know that for a fact. If they didn't exist, my channel wouldn't exist. And also, if BreadTube didn't exist, my channel probably would have never become popular because there wouldn't have been that audience. So I'd say both these movements, the lib-leftist news politics movement spearheaded by TYT and BreadTube spearheaded by these creators, has been like a very positive influence on the online left space. But with both of them, you start beginning to see the problems. And in some ways, it's just like a natural evolution of age, political shifts. Like, who is the biggest left-wing content creator now? It's Hassan, right? Who is like an open socialist, expresses positive sentiment towards things like Marxism, talks about absolutely every single topic because his format is live streaming and not video essays. And that is where the audience has kind of shifted. Like, we don't want to support the Democrats and even really people like AOC and Bernie Sanders. We're kind of done with all of that. And we want something more radical. And we want our system to completely change. And I guess when conditions in the world are getting so bad, especially in Western countries with the rise of fascism, it feels like if you're getting your politics from video essayists rather than people who talk about everything, it just seems like it exists in such a vacuum now, this kind of content, that it increasingly becomes unrelatable. I'm not saying there isn't a place for it, especially as entertainment, but in terms of actually doing anything in the online political space, I think, BreadTube specifically has run its course. And now let's talk about that, and let's go into the topic, which is things to do with Israel and Gaza and BreadTube's failure to really discuss these things for a variety of reasons. Now, the defense I see of these creators not talking about anything is wild to me because I don't think anyone is asking them, like their audiences primarily, you have to release an 8-hour video or a 4-hour video discussing the history of Israeli colonialism or something like that. It's more what people see as your weird silence about stuff just speak volumes about maybe your politics or why you even started your channels in the first place, and why you are now becoming irrelevant to people who really care about these things, because it's clear what maybe your ambitions with the channel were and it wasn't really related to anything tangible in terms of politics. But I also don't accept the defense because I see so many people in public life who have risked stuff by talking about this. So you really just have to ask yourself, if you're defending the political video essay channels from actually commenting about Gaza, you have to ask yourself why you're doing that. So Denise Goff, who is the star of Andor Season 1 and Season 2. I followed her since Season 1 because she's the voice of Yennefer in one of my favourite games, The Witcher 3. She's always been really good on Palestine, right? But as she was getting all this attention for Andor Season 2, she didn't stop posting about it. She started continually posting about it, like nearly every single time she even posted on social media. So this is an actress who's used her platform to speak up for humanity and used her platform to raise awareness. And you feel like if you are a celebrity with that kind of platform, that is a good thing to do. But she's not like super famous or anything. It's not like there's going to be no repercussions for doing this, but she's choosing to do this instead. You could make the point, oh, well, she's Irish. Are Irish people immune from facing backlash? Like, I know people accept it a tiny bit more because we have our own history with the struggles against colonialism. But at the same time, look what is happening to Kneecap. And that's a good example. Kneecap, Bob Villain, they all spoke up on these massive platforms and they're increasingly facing these crazy backlashes, and they still did it anyway, even though they're artists, not political commentators. So when you're seeing all these people, and it's not just them, it's people across entertainment, journalism, everything, who are risking stuff to speak up about Palestine and British and American fascism, you think it's a great thing, and you're like, why doesn't everyone do this? But if you have made your career in left-wing politics, making videos on left-wing politics, your source of revenue is primarily crowdfunding, and people have given you this voice to speak about these things and maybe change people's opinions, help change the culture and stuff, I just don't know how you can be okay with not saying something. And to give you my perspective of it as a creator, I know these people all release less videos than someone like me, Hassan, loads of different people, right? But even that adds a little element of, well, you don't upload much, so you could really do something here that would be really good. Either a massive live stream like Noah Samson did, that like marathon, like 8-day stream, or you could make a video, or you could collab with someone, go on someone else's channel to talk about it, like use your platform to get your audience who might be more like lib-leftists on board with this stuff. And I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes of like, I understand they see their videos differently to how I see my videos. My videos are just me talking about something. Their videos to them are probably like their art. It's their art. So why would they have to talk about something like this. But I feel like there's just a certain element to this I just cannot understand saying silent on, or relatively silent on, because, like I said, it's not just a geopolitical issue. Our government is totally complicit. And even with that as well, it's not just totally complicit in carrying out this terrible genocide in Palestine. These governments are actively weaponizing identity politics against its citizens to wage this crazy war on free speech, where now in the UK, it's now a terror offence to support an anti-Israeli, pro-Palestinian civil disobedience group. And if you're not going to speak up now, just when would the right time be? That's what I mean. Like, when would the right time be? What would the conditions be that you would finally say something? Do we have to have internment camps for like Muslims and socialists? Like, do we have to get to that point? And that's what I'm saying. As a creator, I feel a certain debt to my own community because I wouldn't exist in this space without them. I wouldn't do this as a job without them. And most of my income isn't made through Patreon or anything like that. Obviously, super appreciate my patrons and everything, but my livelihood isn't primarily funded by them. But I still feel responsibility because I know people just don't have a voice for themselves. So if I can like lead a fundraiser, which I've done a few times on this channel, or I can just keep talking about certain issues and educate people, even though it does feel at times with my small channel, I'm just like saying shit into the ether and no one even like hears it. I just feel a responsibility to do it. And also I understand how for a lot of people, they'll never be satisfied as well. I understand that element because I've got that as well. I've had people, and I had another YouTuber recently in my comments saying, why have you stopped talking about Gaza? Which was bizarre to me because I'd recently made 2 videos on it, but I understand how there can be these annoying people who can use things like that to constantly have a go at you. Like, why aren't you talking about it? Why aren't you talking about it? Why isn't every single video you upload about this? Why? And I understand there is an element who will be like probably asking too much and be annoying, but I feel like the general sentiment is, and I see that with even people like Pedro Pascal getting credit for like the tiny bit of lip service he pays Palestine. I think people just want some acknowledgement and want you to do something with your platform that they've helped given you, because you do have this elevated platform to speak on these issues and people will listen to you and people won't listen to most other people. And I feel there's a responsibility, if you care about left-wing politics, if you care about humanity, if you're an anti-fascist, if you're against Islamophobia, if you're against anti-Semitism for that matter, you should be speaking up against what your government is doing. And you should be using your big platform to speak up about that. That's my perspective. But like I said, video isn't a pressure video. I don't want these people to say anything because in my head, they've made the choice. And them saying anything now, while I'm sure a lot of people would love it, to me, we've long since passed the place of people just, you know, deciding to finally care about it. Like, you either care about it at this point enough or you don't care about it enough. And it's clear if you don't speak up, you don't care about it enough. And that's something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life when you look back at this time in history. And it's something your audiences can fairly judge you on because you can make every excuse in the book. I don't think any of them are good. And when I went on Noah's stream, we had a chat about this. I was really surprised about he was talking about his background on this stuff and how he was only exposed to how terrible it was like recently with October 2023. And I was really surprised because he's done such a good job making all this content and it completely smashes the excuse of maybe they're not educated about it.
Obviously, you became like a left-wing YouTuber with a certain style of content, which was the kind of content I make as well, like, you know, no-fap you know, I saw that video today and I was like, I've made a video on that back in the day. So
Yeah.
loads of that stuff, like, I've also covered. Then it's like I said, so many people like yourself just haven't made videos about Palestine. So then I'm interested, like, why, like, talk about maybe, if you want, like, your upbringing and how you became, like, left, and then suddenly now you're, like, this massive, like, pro-Palestinian content creator. It's just, like, an interesting pivot. But also one you didn't actually have to even make, like, if you were just focused on being, like, in some sort of e-celeb. Like, it has helped you in a way, but, like, doing that content, like, you weren't going into it thinking, oh, I can't wait to make this, it's gonna do really well views wise, because it doesn't. And a lot of that stuff is so controversial. All the normie libs who subscribe to you based on your nofap video are probably gonna hate you for what you talk about. So I'm interested in like even your upbringing, but everything that affected like that kind of pivot into like more serious content, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I hadn't, I think, made a standalone video about Israel Palestine before October 7th, which is you know, a cynical thing that often gets mentioned, like, oh, you didn't care about this before October 7th. And I'm kind of like, I mean, it's not that I didn't care, it's that this thing, like most people was not even on their radar. And October 7th changed that. And that's part of, I think, I guess Israel's response to October 7th, right? Where when you see what's happening, I think for a lot of people, it's changed them forever and made them, I have no problem saying that this is a cause and a pursuit of justice for what's happening that I'm like potentially willing to spend my life doing, at least, in part with other sort of projects in that vein. But yeah, I guess at the time, I was also frustrated with feeling like being a part of a YouTube ecosystem that's just like, here's a thing that's entertaining you and go about your day, specifically under the auspices of, anti-misogyny or anti-racism. Like I did a video about the Vosh Professor Flowers debate, and I remember thinking like, oh, I saw this thing that happened. I felt like what this guy did to this person was really fucked up, and it just felt wrong. And like, I don't know how I'm gonna say something about this, but I feel like I feel the need to. But I remember during and after feeling like this thing happened on the internet, and I said what I wanted to say about it, but it was also, I remember I shared like the video to my dad because he had asked what I was working on, and he was kind of just like, I don't know how any of this relates to the real world at all. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's correct. And it took hearing that or thinking that over time enough times to say like, what are any of us doing here if we're talking about politics in this way, rather than, if I will never behoove like an entertainer, Curtis Connor type, if they're going to make videos to entertain people strictly, even if they do have some elements of like anti-misogyny. Usually if it's a guy just being like, women shouldn't vote, then it's like, okay, that's an easy video to make. And somehow, if he makes it in a funny way, that's fine. But when it comes to political content, it's like, oh, there's a serious conflict of, or I don't know if conflict is the right word, but barrier to genuine engagement that is developed in the mind of someone that's trying to make content and be successful at it. Trying to, I guess, appeal to an audience of people that, once you built up an audience capture, as you mentioned, it's like, okay, well, do I want to talk about Palestine? I mean, I don't know what the click-through rate will be like on a video that's about something so serious, or I don't know. I could just do a Trump video and people that's relevant to the U.S. and it's closer, and most people don't have ties to Israel Palestine, so why does it really matter? And I don't know. I mean, to me that's like, I can't conceive of that as anything other than disgusting, given what I and a lot of people have been exposed to over the past 2 years, right? It's like I can no longer understand that.
Here's someone who admits they weren't so educated about it, and then they make really great videos about it now. Because if you're a smart person, even if you don't know about it, you can research it, listen to the right voices, and make something good about it. And you can even talk about it with authority if you had the time to learn this, because you are doing this as a job where you have more free time or more work time to read about these subjects. So if he can do something like that, I just don't accept the excuses that very, very intelligent people who make very good videos and video content cannot articulate some sort of argument about why something is bad and find out their own spin on how to help things. It's not purity testing to say that people who make their revenues and livelihoods of a left-wing audience should probably say something about fascism completely taking over Western politics just to defend the worst crimes against humanity you've probably ever seen in your life. Sorry, I just don't accept that. And if you are knee-jerkingly trying to defend these people in the comments because of your parasocial relationship, just rethink your argument and apply it to if it was someone you didn't like. And apply it to if maybe it was me, because you might not like my videos and like my content. So maybe ask yourselves, if I didn't talk about it, what would you say? But let's talk about the recent discourse that actually inspired me to make this video in the first place. So, like I said, the BreadTube subreddit is seriously debating whether they should completely ban Contrapoints posts because of what she's been saying about Palestine recently. So a lot of BreadTubers, not just the ones we're talking about, they don't say anything. Maybe they'll share a little meme here and there. Maybe they'll share a little meme about the IDF, share some post maybe about, Jeremy Corbyn made a speech. But Contrapoints has actually spoke about some of this. And there's just like tweet exchanges I've seen her been making. And this is the one that prompted the controversy originally. So she replied to someone saying, "I'm not defending Russia in any way, but the US is a white settler colony that is currently bankrolling another colony's ethnic cleansing. If that isn't uniquely evil in 2025, and I don't know what is. Killing 60,000 people is probably the worst atrocity of the last 2 years, but in the scope of modern history, it is unfortunately far from unique. I'm not going to debate the death toll with you, but you very well know there's a uniquely racial component to the Palestinian genocide. It is by far the most extreme example of white supremacy in the 21st century. Without making any excuses for what Israel is doing or has done, I don't think white supremacy is the best framework for understanding the ideology behind it." So beyond maybe the contrarian nature of discussing this, why people are mad at that is because she says, and this is in the middle of June 2025, that 60,000 people have been killed in Gaza. This number is so outdated. Bernie Sanders has been saying similar. I remember when it was at 40,000 officially. Everyone was saying 40,000. And there's been reports, I think, that are nearly a year old, that have said it's over 100,000 and it's probably closer to 200,000. So people are mad because they're like, how can you say 60,000? Like, you know it's higher than that. Saying that is just playing into the US government's official tallies and just basically helping whitewash the crimes. And even saying that it's the worst crime of the last 2 years. I mean, what was the 2 years ago that was worse? Obviously, what Russia has been doing in Ukraine is absolutely terrible. But even compared to that, more children have been killed in Palestine, right? And in terms of percentages of a population that have been devastated by an invading army, Palestine is worse. And what we're seeing in Palestine in terms of just a complete war on civilians is the worst thing of this century. Indisputable at this point. There has been loads of terrible shit, of course. Iraq, Afghanistan, all these other terrible wars, genocides around the world. I would say this is by far the worst one, and white supremacy is the perfect framework to understand it. The only thing I would say is you adapt it, and I would say it's Western chauvinism, white supremacy. So it's not specifically about the whiteness of the skin, but it's pretty clear Israel's ideology around its colonialism is heavily influenced by white settler nations like the United States, and we view ourselves now with the Judeo-Christians. We are the West. The West might not be completely pale-skinned, but it's still ran by primarily white people, and we see Israel as part of that. There's a reason their propaganda completely focuses, when they advertise it in English, to Westerners who are white, and everyone featured in it is usually a white person with an American, South African, Australian, or French accent or whatever, right? It is part of the white supremacist project. I would just, if I was going to be a bit more specific, I would say it's part of a Western chauvinist supremacist project. I'm not saying Contrapoints hasn't said what's going on is bad, but when you're debating stuff like this, and you're talking like this, and you're throwing out that 60,000 number, you can understand why people are mad, because it's not just a left-wing or right-wing thing. It's just, you're not living in reality if you think it's 60,000. And you're smart, you know better, you just trust the US government so much. I know everyone hates her for the Hillary Clinton video as well, but I just found that wild. But also, what spawned this video was because she was fighting with Taylor Lorenz, because she reposted a guy called Rathbone, who I don't like, by the way, so I'm not here to defend anything he posts or what he says. But she writes, are you guys just noticing that 50% of the discourse on this app is just Jew hate? Now, I would say that 80% of Twitter is just outright neo-Nazi hatred against Jewish people. I would also say that left-wing anti-Semitism hardly makes up any of that number, and leftist anti-Semitism is very, very irrelevant to anything that's happening right now. It doesn't have institutional power. I don't actually even really see it around, and I'm someone who's made videos calling out people who use anti-Zionism as an excuse for anti-Semitism, and nearly every single one I ever talk about is actually just a fascist. I don't really see any prominent left-wing people who are actually using this just for anti-Semitism. Yes, there is people who are left-wing and they're anti-Semitic and they use anti-Zionist talking points. I would say modern leftist anti-Semitism has historically revolved around Israel. That's pretty much it. There are some leftist anti-Semite who buy into conspiracies about Jewish bankers controlling the world and all that shit, but primarily it's not an issue. And I'm not going to start pretending it's an issue just because someone's got their feelings hurt by someone being too anti-Israel. And I would say leftists, even now, are too careful about their language. One of my problems with TYT's Israel coverage specifically, even though I think they've done an okay job of it, is they keep acting like it's the Israeli government doing these things, not that 80% of Israeli Jews support the worst crimes right now, and globally this religion and ethnic identity has been majorly hijacked by a fascist colonial ideology. I don't even see the majority of leftists talking like that, to be honest. So to even focus on left-wing anti-Semitism is just a poor use of your platform. She was arguing with someone about the video because someone was saying that Rathbone isn't anti-Semitic, every president at the Western Wall being controlled to basically be pro-Israeli. Taylor Lorenz replying to this and jumping in, saying, not going to litigate this video, but I think that when making a claim like 50% of the discourse on this app is Jew hate, it's extremely important to note that 99.9% of the anti-Semitism on this app is from the far right and actual neo-Nazis who Musk has embraced, not communist TikTokers. Natalie saying, left anti-Semitism has always been a thing. I don't see what is gained in denying it. Absolutely, no one is denying that it exists, but it's minimal and fringe compared to the deluge of right-wing anti-Semitism. That's why it's essential to contextualize these comments by making it clear that 99.9% of anti-Semitism on this app is from the far right, and by conflating the scale of the very fringe and limited anti-Semitism on the left with the virtual and pervasive anti-Semitism on the right, you give credence to the bad faith Zionists who continue to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. So I just skipping through because I just go through back and forth. I'll put it on the screen. I'm not going to read it all. Taylor saying, I don't see people saying leftist anti-Semitism doesn't exist, but if you say 50% of this app is Jew hate and point to a communist creator, of course people will ask you to clarify. It seems like you're conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. You are the one making this conflation. If anti-Zionism sometimes means opposition to genocide in Gaza, and other times it means the Zios killed JFK because he was the only president they couldn't control, maybe Hitler had a point, I think that will have bad consequences. Nowhere here did I or anyone replying to this thread that I've seen say the second thing. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. I think when your content is being used by a Zionist like Ethan Klein, you might want to consider that your message could have been communicated with more nuance. I don't think this issue is reducible to Hassan versus Ethan. No one mentioned Hassan here. I said if your post is being leveraged by a well-known Zionist, it's probably worth clarifying your message. And that's because Ethan Klein was posting this basically saying, all us leftists are defending Rathbone and we're actually all Nazis who believe in the second thing. And again, like you just see why people are mad because she jumps from people, it sometimes means what they're doing in Gaza is bad, and other times it means actually, the Nazis were good because they control JFK and stuff. I don't see anyone on the left saying that. It's just like wild to jump from like, yeah, that Rathbone guy, I don't know fucking much about him. If he said some shit that is crazy, like that's just one guy. I do not see this as a problem. I have been making anti-Zionist left-wing content since like 2019. I do not recall any major leftist content creator in this space ever being anti-Semitic. Obviously, I'm not as well-versed in TikTok, so I don't know if people there are being there, but it is not a problem with left-wing creators. It's not a problem with left-wing spaces. It's not a problem generally with the left-wing pro-Palestinian movement. And actually, I see most people making the caveat that the US controls Israel, not the other way around. That's something the right-wing America First anti-Semites love to say, that the Jews control everything. We make the point that the US love Israel as this outpost in the Middle East to do their dirty work for them. And you can do the nuance of they have massive lobby groups in the US, which mean they can have like a massive influence on certain groups, like the Democrats, where you have like evangelical Christians who absolutely love Israel anyway, so they don't even need to be bribed with foreign lobby money. But it's clear Contrapoints just doesn't really like left-wing people, in my opinion, like outwardly left-wing people. And even her arguments in this, it just feels like someone trying to be difficult, being purposefully vague to just have these arguments. And this is why people are annoyed at her specifically, is because she is choosing to weigh in on this. She's just not saying anything productive or using her platform in a productive way. So much so people like Ethan Klein are using her post to attack leftists as like actual anti-Semites. So again, that's like the queen of BreadTube being like this when it comes to such an important issue. Again, not saying she doesn't think it's bad, not saying she doesn't think what's happening in Palestine is bad. It's pretty clear she's coming at it from a very liberal, pro-establishment perspective and is choosing the weird time to start talking about left-wing anti-Semitism. She could have easily said to Taylor Lorenz's point, yeah, I was mainly talking about how Twitter is a neo-Nazi shithole and most people posting things about Jews are Nazis. She's not clarifying that because she probably doesn't believe that. She's probably talking about actual anti-Zionist and she probably is conflating it. Don't want to put words in her mouth, but her being vague does help me in that belief. So that is Contrapoints. So if we move on to like another creator, PhilosophyTube has also not really said anything. There is a small reference to Gaza about 20 minutes in a video about how death changes your perspective, but she lumps that in with like the COVID pandemic and climate change as like these mass death things. So it's not very specific. It's like a throwaway line. And then I was just looking what like their audiences thought. So I just went on the PhilosophyTube subreddit. I typed in Gaza. Someone posted a year ago. This could be even longer, like a year and a half ago. Just curious because I haven't seen any mention of it on her Twitter, despite her left-wing politics that feature heavily in her videos. I know many popular leftist creators haven't been talking too much about it, but I know people like Contrapoints have at least done a tweet or two expressing their views on it. Anything from Abby? Someone replied, I think it's worth noting that Abby is a professional actor and making a capital S statement with how she really feels, as well thought out and compassionate and nuanced as her opinions likely are, would very probably do an extreme amount of damage to her career and would not have much more of an impact than retweeting she has done. I personally expect that she is donating or contributing in other ways privately, and she just replies a love heart. So obviously, because she's not clarifying, she could be replying a love heart to behind the scenes. She's actually giving loads to different fundraisers and she's doing like other things behind the scenes, and that's all well and good. But it obviously does come more across of I now am in Star Wars and Game of Thrones and I don't want to jeopardize my career. But I mean, at least she's being kind of upfront about it, and you can kind of tell. I'm not saying it's an excuse because, like I said, there is someone in Star Wars who has recently made their entire platform about Gaza and has probably hurt their own like rise in the acting world by doing so. You can see why I'm talking about like the failures of BreadTube. If we're meant to see these people and put them on like some sort of pedestal for being moral and political, it's just someone there saying my acting career is more important than having principles on this very specific thing. And let's just also remember it's the acting career, because if she did this on her YouTube channel, it would be a successful video and people would like it as well, because that's the benefit of being a left-wing YouTuber. You can talk about very, very controversial things and not worry about losing your job tomorrow. And you have the actual ability to talk about these things in detail like myself and say things that you actually can't say in a traditional workplace. And having that as like a fallback as well while pursuing an acting career, which also might be fine if you post some stuff about Gaza, because lots of actors have. I personally don't see it as an excuse, but again, these people made their decisions and they just kind of have to live with them and accept that people are going to judge them for it, because it's perfectly a fine thing to do, that if you prioritize career over principles. But there's just the caveat with these people. Of course, she's talented in her own right as an actress, but at the same time, you did become famous through this crowdfunded YouTube channel talking about left-wing politics and morals, specifically even making videos about Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. People are right to maybe be upset if they're fans of yours that you don't talk about these things. So finally, let's move on to just a third creator I want to talk about. So Hbomberguy like doesn't even release videos pretty much. The last one was like a year and a half ago. There's Patreon exclusive videos about Oreos or something I think I saw. People have been asking on his subreddit for a while, like, you think he's going to make a video on Gaza? It's pretty clear he's not going to make one. And this post here says, he seems to care about the subject. It'd be great to see him present the facts in a video, for it might land his channel in the drama void. I would really doubt that. It's fine if he doesn't cover it, probably easier for him. It's depressing, but it has been getting more and more obscure, and it would be a crime to let such an important issue fade from the public view. So people got really funny with me because when it started, he put out like some terrible statement about how he couldn't say anything because he doesn't know enough and it wouldn't be helpful. He did delete it and he backtracked, he posted fundraisers, and he has tweeted pretty consistently anti-Israeli stuff, or should I more say he's retweeted things. He hasn't actually posted many things. He did post some stuff, which is actually shared in the thread here, but I clicked on all of them. It seems they're all deleted. Tweets that said, like, what could Israel possibly do to get condemned by world leaders at this point? I want to know. If this isn't a war crime, what is left that would be? If you're wondering why the TikTok generation sides so strongly with Palestine, it's because the IDF keeps posting videos where they're destroying children's homes. If you're wondering which country is doing genocide, it's the one trying to dunk on the UN for saying war crimes are bad. So those are all deleted. Again, I don't know why, but he has used his platform to kind of talk about this stuff, but people who are his fans are still annoyed. Like I was saying at the time, like, you should use your platform, you should feel some sort of responsibility. I do understand, like, I'm not completely dismissing that certain creators view their videos differently, but there are other things you can kind of do with your platform. Like, Sean did that massive live stream, Noah did that marathon stream. These aren't prolific content creators either. They're not releasing videos 3 times a week like myself. I just don't really accept it as a justification for not using your platform. And again, these 3 creators, American and British, when you're seeing what Trump is using, like Israel's actions to do in the US with his war on free speech, allegedly attacking everyone who's anti-Semitic. And in the UK, as I already said, Palestine Action has been made a terror group. The police have been increasingly brutalising pro-Palestinian protesters, and they're setting the stage for something far worse to happen. We are living in a time where the fascist laws are being created and the Islamophobia is being ramped up, because what is coming next, and people aren't talking about, is climate change is going to create loads of climate refugees. And loads of these climate refugees will be in majority Muslim countries in North Africa and the Middle East. And like many people around the world, they're going to go northwards. But what is going to happen? Are we going to be humane? Are we going to incorporate these refugees into society? Are we going to take the steps now so that in 20 years we can provide for these people and give them new homes? Because, we are all just human beings, and just being born a certain place doesn't mean you should suffer and we shouldn't help you. No, what's going to happen is they're desensitizing you now. They're enacting all these laws now, because when these people come and the climate refugees come to Europe, they're going to be doing what they're doing to the Palestinians to them, and they're trying to normalize it for you. They're driving up this insane Islamophobia to try and normalize all this stuff to you, and this Western chauvinism is running rampant. If now is not the time to raise awareness about this fascism rising across Europe and America, I don't know what is. And if that isn't the sign that BreadTube video essayists are not actually helpful for the current moment on online politics, I don't know what is. And that's what I was trying to say throughout the video, and make the point of, these people were important, and they were important to online politics, but now they're not, and they've been eclipsed by people, not because the next generation are better content creators or make better videos or do any of this stuff. It's that the next generation, the younger generation, they're more principled, and they care about stuff more, and they're more left-wing, and they're willing to stand on their principles a lot more, and they don't view their content in a vacuum. They don't view it as primarily just about a career. It's about doing something with your platform to help everyone. And that's what I feel like the difference has become. You have the new wave led by people like Hassan. Like him or don't, he does do a lot of good for like charities and raises loads of money for things like causes to do with Palestine and everything. Like I said, Noah Samson, loads of others, Sean, they're all doing this now, while the others primarily focus on themselves and growing their audiences even more. And for them, best to stay out of controversy. Best to not talk about this controversial thing. I'm a cynical person. I don't trust people. I think career and finances always play a role in people's decision to not talk about hard things. And I'm sure Denise from Andor, she knew this would affect her career and she did it anyway. And you just have to respect people for doing that. And again, this isn't the pressure video. I don't want any BreadTube video essayists who are on the fence and kind of feeling guilty but haven't said anything. I don't want them to watch this video and then say stuff. They've made their choice. And on that note, I'm not a fan, but a lot of people are fans. So I asked my audience, like, what do you think about this? And I thought it was an interesting perspective, because lots of people were saying they were converted to leftism, there's such big influence on them, all the stuff that I mentioned before about them being very positive forces. Contrapoints is clearly intelligent, and her work shows she has thought a lot about the way things are and should be. As a former fan, I've thought a lot about the way things are and should be. I'm perplexed at how these people look at the same set of facts I have large platforms and choose silence, or to focus on other less consequential things while an entire people are systematically eradicated. It's been really disappointing actually, and a little surprising. Contrapoints and Hbomb videos were instrumental in introducing me to leftist ideas and understanding the landscape of the culture wars and the influence of horrible right-wing racists, so I definitely expected more from them on this, and I wouldn't want to say that they are cancelled, but it definitely makes me side-eye them from this point on. I definitely think they have all a responsibility to address it. When you have a giant platform, you need to use it. If not now, when? This is the moment we all need to be using our voices. I do believe that just because someone doesn't say something on social media doesn't mean they're not doing anything in real life. However, I also think that if someone has a large social media following built specifically on leftist politics, they do have more of a responsibility to utilize it to inform people and take a stance on vital issues like Palestine than the average person does. If they feel they're not informed enough to speak, they have other options, educating themselves for one and sharing the words of others who are more informed, sharing articles, charity fundraisers. It's not even a case of not having something to say all the time to speak on every single topic, since Palestine is essentially the major issue of our current time. Plus, other leftist creators with sizable platforms like Jesse Gender and Jack Saint spoke up plenty. So it's disappointing that these huge creators don't seem to care enough to do the minimum. It's certainly disappointing seeing creators who you feel have integrity just go, nope, I'm not touching that. I'm glad Noah Samson fully leaned into it. It definitely showed integrity, but I'm seeing an awful lot of creators who are just silent about it. I don't mind if they aren't constantly posting because it's not their brand, but at least show some support for Gaza at any point on their Instagram grid, not just stories. That would be nice. I want to give them a bit of grace, particularly Abigail Thorne, but it is disappointing. I reckon it's probably strategic on her end. With a few roles they've got on TV, they are pushing trans awareness. I don't think they had the clout to survive being a public trans figure and vocally pro-Palestine and still maintain their mainstream presence. For Contrapoints, I reckon American leftists are just cooked. Hbomberguy is a bit wild though, can't understand his absence. I unsubbed and stopped watching all of them by December 23 due to their silence, went back to watching PhilosophyTube when she talked about the genocide for the first time, stopped watching her again when I realised her takes were liberal at best. I used to watch all three of them religiously, even hosting watch parties with friends whenever they would upload. I don't care for any of them at this point. Contrapoint specifically, hate her guts because of the stupid hill she's chosen to die on regarding this. I read you all that because I wanted to give you the perspective of people who actually like them, not just someone like me who you'd call jealous, a hater. You just want to be like them and you have to try and bring them down on something, which I'm not trying to do. But yeah, that was just interesting to read, especially that last one. And I totally get it because you follow people you respect and you admire and you like, and you follow them for different reasons. And when something like this happens, you see them post like in support of Israel or give some liberal both sides thing, and it just like really degrades them in your view or sickens you. Like I unfollowed so many people in the same kind of period, like the end of 2023, because I'm like, how the fuck did I misjudge you so bad that you have said these terrible things? And I feel like it's even worse if you put leftist content creators on a pedestal when this one issue comes out and then you're like, well, you're just going to be silent and not talk about it. This is at the start, and now, you know, nearly 2 years later, it's pretty much the same. What I think a lot of those messages also represent is, you know, people watch them religiously and now they hate them or they're done with them or they don't want to watch them anymore. And I think that's just to say that they have served their purpose politically and they have done a lot of good politically. And I'm not ever going to take that away from them. There's a lot in this space that wouldn't exist without these people pioneering it in the first place. So they should always be brought up in that conversation, even if we don't like them now, disagree with them now, or we're disappointed with them. They did help create this space in the first place, the same way with the Young Turks. They helped to create this space in the first place. But when you go on weird reactionary paths, or you are silent in the face of something that you can't imagine why anyone would be silent on, or relatively silent, or choosing to talk about weird things instead of silence, like leftist anti-Semitism, and it feels like as any sort of like leader in this space, you need to be kind of left behind. And we just kind of have to recognize that these people don't care about the politics they spoke about as much as they said they did. And it's very easy to care about things without consequence in a vacuum and make these video essays that are vague and about abstract concepts, and you don't have to be that specific, or you don't have to even be that relevant. You don't have to respond to stuff that's happening ever, and then suddenly your audience want you to do that and they're asking, well, why don't you do that? And in your head you're like, well, I don't do that type of thing. I don't. And that's why it's frustrating to people, because it's like, well, we're trying to make you see this isn't like the audience asking you make a video about Jeremy Corbyn starting a new political party or something. It's not. It's about this one terrible thing that is literally destroying Western society right now, and the establishment is using it to centralize its authority, to attack free speech, and the world is just getting worse because of this. And yes, there is risk involved. There always is risk involved in talking about these things, but there is also significantly less risk involved for left-wing YouTubers to talk about these things. Of course, I am well aware of UK free speech laws, and if I'm totally honest, I would say I would like to talk about this in a different way that I can't talk about. And this is coming from me, someone who doesn't really have much of a filter when I talk about it. I am very conscious of UK free speech laws, so even I have to self-censor myself in some way because of UK law. But I don't think even people are asking them to push the boundaries. It's just like, there are creators who've set great examples and you could follow them, or you could have followed them, or you could have been the example. You could have inspired the whole of these people. And I just think there is such a correlation between people on Nebula and people who spoke about left-wing anti-Semitism and not spoken much about Gaza, that you just have to ask yourselves, like, what are the point of these creators beyond entertainment? Are they informative? Yes. Are they educated? Yes. They put out like one video every so often. Here they won't speak about certain things that their audience want them to speak about. And that is just disappointing. But we've moved past them and we don't need them anymore. And I might have said in the description, it's like the death of BreadTube. But it's just evolved into something I think that's better. Not better in terms of entertainment, not better in terms of quality, but I think there's more diversity. I think there's more like genuine principles. I think there's more leftism. I think there is more like just challenging the status quo in a way that is more immediate and real than what came before. You got to be grateful for these people even existing, because they did set the stage for the rest of us. But that's what they did. They set the stage. And now we don't really have to pay attention to them anymore, because they might make interesting videos about stuff. They might be entertaining. But at the same time, now their output is so minimal and their politics are so like, not centrist, but like establishment in their leftism, that there's not really like a use for them anymore beyond the entertainment stuff. So them becoming actors or more mainstream or whatever, like, fair enough. And the justification for PhilosophyTube is, I'm an actor now, I can't say these things, and that's whatever. But yeah, it's totally fair to judge these people. And I will not accept comments hating on me for criticizing these people for not using their platform. If you're seriously here to do that, I don't know what to tell you. Like, think about what we're talking about here. Again, I will reiterate, this is not a pressure video for anyone to talk about stuff they don't want to talk about. It's just a video about why these people are becoming irrelevant and why they should become irrelevant. Because if you're not going to take a stand on this, you're not going to take a stand on anything when stuff gets worse. And it's going to get worse. And you have to be ready for what this genocide is setting the stage for. And it's even worse fucking shit to come in the future, that our governments are gleefully looking at this stuff, being like, everyone is getting desensitized and the gaslighting is working because our citizens are not doing anything. We voted in the Labour government after Keir Starmer said it was right to cut off water. So anyway, that's it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And I'll just say to people who just get really defensive, you can keep watching their content. I'm not telling anyone not to watch their content. You can keep enjoying it. I would say objectively they make good videos, but it's also okay to be very annoyed. Like, a lot of their fans are, and a lot of people are very disappointed. And with Contrapoints, like what she's saying, I just think it's bad. And that's it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.